And we really branch out. In fact, tomorrow we're doing a program at West Columbia Library. If you want to come to that one. It's going to be C.W.
Clicker
Bowman.
here for you if you want to use it for your slideshow. Or I can
If you were to, I'll just, the thing isn't really set up with the lecturers. It's so, but I'll kind of look at you and
North
just.
Vietnamese declared the formation of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. That's one day after Saigon fell, which happened 50 years ago yesterday. These people's lives would never be the same again. Then he came to America. Today, Joe Dunn, who's the Charles A. Dana Professor of History at Converse, will be speaking about one of those. He's going to be concentrating on a Montagnard soldier who fought on the South Vietnamese and American side, named Cook Kasor, right?
Coxor.
Kasor. He came to South Carolina after the war and spent the rest of his life as an advocate for the people of the Montagnard people back in Southeast Asia. After Joe speaks, I will have free passes, as we have the last few weeks, for anybody who'd like to go over and have a free tour of the museum, particularly, given our subject matter, the Vietnam exhibit. So, would you please join me in welcoming Joe Dunn?
How much time do I have? How much time shall we?
Do you think you will need this for the room?
Probably not.
Okay.
How much time?
We stop at 1.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Running a little late. And my hearing aids, I'm going to take one of them out because Anyway, I went to the wrong place. My bad. So, all right. I'm going to just say a few words about the end of the war in Vietnam, but then I'm going to go into a special topic. When Fritz called me about this, he said, something different than what we've had. I don't know what you've had. I gave one of the first speeches. I don't know what you had, but something different, and this will be different. But just a word about the end of the war. And as I've been watching on the news in the last few days and watching the scenes, Vietnam is a very different place. From when I was there in 69, 70, and certainly when we went back a few years ago, my wife and I, on a tourism tour, it's a very different place. The village that I was in Swan Lock, where the last battle of the war was fought, 45 miles east of Saigon. It was the last confrontation with the 18th ARVN that I helped to train when I was there with the 199th Infantry, the worst unit in the entire South Vietnamese military, but we must have done a good job in getting them upgraded because at On Loc in 71 they fought bravely, and then at Swan Lock in April of 1945 they fought bravely, holding that town before they were just overrun, and the North Vietnamese moved into Saigon, and it fell on the last day of April. I will say, that town of Swan Lock, I was teaching in Vietnam War. I've been teaching the Vietnam War since 1974. I was teaching in Bitburg, Germany, a nuclear strike base, Cold War strike base for striking in a nuclear war, striking the Soviet Union. I was teaching on that base in April of 1975, and during the day, I was teaching at night. During the day, I would watch the fight, the battle in Swan Lock. I tell you, I knew intimately. I knew the scenes. I knew everything about it. I saw what was there. Saw the beautiful church being destroyed, and then I would go in. I would go in at night and speaking to military officers and dependents and some other people and talk about the ending of the war. It was one of the most traumatic, difficult experiences of my life. Now, I never made it back. When we went to Vietnam again, I never made it back to Swan Lock, but I understand it's not a dusty little village anymore. It has hotels and large business things, and the Miss Asia competition was held in Swan Lock. It's obviously some years ago. It's quite a very different place. I would just say again about the end of the war. The average age in Vietnam today is 32. They weren't alive 50 years ago. Not that many people are alive. The length of life is relatively short, although improving in Vietnam. And it's a non-thing in Vietnam. It's a non-starter. You talk to Vietnamese today, youth, they say, I just want to make money. Just want to make money. Learn English because English is the tool for making money globally. So that's about all I'm going to say. It's the end of the war was a traumatic thing. The 199th Infantry that I served in closed down in 1970. I was the last person, literally the last person standing, because I was trying to hang on to, in the rules of the day, if you had less than 2 months left when you came back from Vietnam and you were going back to school, you could immediately get out and go back to school. I was drafted, worked on a PhD, served, and I needed to get inside that 2-month window. So I was trying to hang on to the very end. I volunteered to stay at the very end. Made it inside the window, but the vagaries of the military, they decided to transfer me anyway to the 1st Cav Division. And so I served. I had to go through the whole 1st Cav business, their introduction and all of that. Served 1 day in the 1st Cav, and they said, oh, you can go home now. I wrote the report on the ending of the 199th. I wrote that report while I was hanging around as the last person standing, called Keystone Robin. When I wrote my memoir some years ago, I went to the National Archives and looked up Keystone Robin, and it was, as I knew it was, and I warned people about using reports like this, it was incredibly self-serving, unbelievably self-serving. It was as bad reading it years later as I wrote it. But I could talk about this forever. It's a fascinating topic. Man, if you hang around, I will talk about this. But I'm going to talk about a group of people that I've been involved with quite a bit lately. I just came back a few weeks ago from the Vietnam Center at Texas Tech University. That's where all the Vietnam study, the archives, that's where all the study, everything is. That's where I used to go all the time. Haven't been able to go for several years because my Model Arab League that I run meets on that week, but this year it didn't. So I took my wife to Lubbock, Texas, and I gave a paper on the Montagnards, which I will be excerpting from here. Interestingly enough, in the audience, I was a young man, not so young, but he looked young to me. Of course, at my age, everybody looks young to me. He came up and said, I'm Montagnard, I am Rad, which you'll hear, and I'm Jirai. This is Coxor. He said, I knew Coxor. And he said, can I interview you? And so I interviewed for an hour on the Montagnard channel, YouTube channel, which is just out. It's been uploaded now, and one can see it if you go on YouTube, the Montagnard channel. So I interviewed for an hour with him. That was quite fascinating. All of that is background. All of that is to what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to try to do this more ad lib as opposed to reading it. Now, this is a long article which I published, and I've just excerpted bits. When I went to Texas, I had a smaller amount of time than I have here to talk. So it's quite excerpted. I'm kind of going to do that. These slides, they're not coordinated well with the presentation, but I'll try to remember and point things out at a time. What is that? The conflict that the United States refers to, the Vietnam War, was far more complex and broad than that. The Vietnam theater was one of multiple theaters, multiple venues, and many different groups, several ethnic and political constituencies, including the Lao, Cambodians, Thais, Hmong, various shades of Cambodians, including the Khmer Rouge, all kinds of ethnic peoples, all part of this war, which really should be called the Indochina War. I'm going to talk about one of these groups. Most of these groups have been written about and have had their voice. The Montagnards have had less of a voice. What are we talking about? You might flip and see. All right. Here's Vietnam, of course, and in the Central Highlands over here, and I think it's a better map, up in this area, the Central Highlands, are a group of the major people along the coastline, the lowlands, the Vietnamese. Although there are 57 different groups of Vietnamese, the Vietnamese are much mixed people, 57 of the kin. But then in the Central Highlands, there are a group of people, 24 ethnic groups, some 30 tribes, different languages, different cultures that constitute the Dagar people of the Highlands, popularly known in the name the French gave them, the Montagnards, the mountain people. And the Montagnards have come to adapt that. Many of these people, the Montagnards, were the first people that the Americans worked with. Now, Americans had been there since the 50s. The Montagnards are animist, and Christian groups from the 50s on were in the Highlands translating the Bible into the various Jarai, Bru, the various Montagnard languages, so there was a connection. When I was in Texas, I met a very elderly man in his 90s who was a missionary to the Jarai back in the 50s, translating the Bible. So Americans were there. But it was beginning in the early 60s, 61, that U.S. forces, the Green Berets, Special Forces, the Green Berets, began working with, training the Montagnards to work with them in various kinds of capacity. And later, through the CIDG, the Civilian Irregular Defense Group, and a Montagnard group called Full worked. They were in the middle of the war. The Montagnards suffered heavy casualties. Let's just try another one and see what's there. Better. The Central Highlands, you see, kind of in the green. And you see some of the tribes. Here, you see some of the tribes. The Jarai, the Rod. They were caught in the center of the war. They suffered tremendous casualties. It's estimated that the Montagnards had all the tribes constitute about 1 million people. They suffered casualty of up to 200 to 220,000. Part of them involved in the war, probably just being in the middle of the war, caught. Much of the war fought in the Central Highlands, where they were. Heavy use of Agent Orange in this area that had consequences. I'm going to tell the story of the Montagnards through one individual. His name is Cook Thor. Arguably the most ubiquitous of the Montagnards. A little background here. Now this is later, but I'll tell it now. Cook Thor ended up in the United States, and he ended up in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I'll tell that story a bit later. And he founded in Spartanburg, South Carolina, the Montagnard Foundation. And had a website, all kinds of things. Now, South Carolina doesn't have Montagnards. The Montagnards ended up in North Carolina in several waves in 82, 88, 92, and largely supported by American soldiers, Green Berets. And so they're around in the Fort Bragg area, in Greensboro, in some north of Charlotte, and Cook is in Spartanburg. I'll come back to that later. A bit of its background. Let's flip the thing and see what we have. Here are some of the I just gave. 87% of the Vietnamese population. 54 different ethnic peoples make up the kin. The Montagnards, 34 tribes, 24 ethnic minorities make up the what they call the Dagar. Okay, we'll try. My wife said I did a horrible job in Texas on this, and I did. Cook in 1961 was 14 years old. He went with his uncle, a raid. The raid is the sort of larger connection. The Jarai are the tribes within that. A raid, Jarai tribes. When he was 14, he dropped out of school and went with his father to Cambodia to fight in Cambodia. And he would continue involved in this until his death in January of 2019. Now, I won't say at this point, I never met Cook Sword. I knew he was in Spartanburg, but somehow I never met him. I have met his family. I've talked to his family. I interviewed his family. So much of the information here comes from the family. I never met him. I deeply regret that. But he was a warrior turned peace activist spokesman. Combat warrior decorated for bravery, became a quiet man of humanity, humility, dignity, and nonviolence. And the founder and the voice of the Montagnard Dagar people. Let me kind of switch over to say that this. We'll talk about Cook's early life. As I say, I have bits and pieces that I was kind of timing at when I was in Texas, how much I could say, so I just have bits and pieces. As I said, Cook was a member of the Jarai tribe. Was born in 1944 in Bonbarai village, and I flip through this one, and let's go, well, we can come back to these. Come back, one more, I wanted to see Bonbarai, yeah, keep going. Oh, well, I have where he was from. There's one, it's much later, I guess. Anyway, he was born in Chio district, what is now the Gil Law province of the Social Republic of Vietnam. As I said, he joined the Jarak movement, which was a Montagnard movement combining the names of several of the tribes, in 1958 as a boy, and then 3 years later went to Cambodia. He left his studies, went to Cambodia. While he was in school, and later joining full role, fighting with the Americans, etc., etc., he survived several Viet Cong attacks as a messenger, largely going back and forth from Cambodia and Vietnam to his home district as a messenger and as a recruiter, recruiting people. At one point, because the Kin considered him as a voice of the Montagnards as dangerous as did the Viet Cong, because to the Kin, the Montagnards, in their definition, wanted a separate country, and so the voices of the Montagnards sometimes were as dangerous as the Viet Cong. So Cook, at times, was a target of both the Viet Cong and the South Vietnamese. Well, earlier, when he was still in school in Ban Tuot, Cook met a young girl, Hallie, and I won't go with the whole rest of her name. My Montagnard languages are even worse than my Vietnamese, which is non-existent. She was the sister of one of the most important Rad tribe Protestant ministers. All of the missionary effort through the years had turned a large number of Montagnards from animist into Protestant Christians. And there were some Catholic missionaries as well. But a prominent Raid minister, she fell in love as a young girl with the young boy. And we're talking, he left school when he was 14. He was older than her. When she turned 18 and graduated from what would be high school, she determined to go to Cambodia to find the young man that she had fallen in love with. Hallie, I should say, is a highly intelligent woman. I've met her. She is brilliant, literally brilliant, as the whole family is. She and two friends took out to find their boyfriends in Cambodia. She arrived at a camp in northeastern Cambodia on an elephant, found them in a secret Foro camp deep in the jungle. Now, it was unacceptable by Montagnard tradition or by Christian tradition for her to be there when she was not married. And so, the next day, Cook and Haile were married. And then Cook left immediately to go to the front, leaving his young wife and all of that. As I said, Cook was a celebrated, legendary Foro warrior. He served in numerous capacities, including with the 4th Infantry Division in Pleiku, the 5th Special Forces. He was wounded in battle, awarded the Purple Heart, was captured by the NVA, tried to defend his wife's home village, Ban Mitwat. And although most of the people he was captured with were put to death by the NVA, for some reason, Cook was not. And so much later, he was surprisingly released. There's no question that Cook was a brave warrior who saw his share of combat and danger. And when he wasn't serving in the military, he served in other capacities. He was a bartender in Pleiku. He worked as a construction person with PA&E, the big military contractors in Vietnam. He had a number, but his main focus always was being a liaison between the Montagnards in his area and in Cambodia and Vietnam. A passionate Christian, Cook believes fervently, and I've read the interviews, that God saved his life many times. That the other people he was captured with were killed. He was let go. There were a number of other instances that God saved his life because God had a special mission for him. There is, if one is of that direction, one could believe there may be truth to that. Now, as I said before, and I'm doing this in kind of order, my wife yells at me. I don't think she made it back. Oh, yeah, she went out to get water, and she's sitting out there with one of my students. Like, will you people come in here and we'll listen? I was just commenting on you. That, well, she went out to get water and did. All right. So my wife and two of my former students here. As I said, Cook was, to me, he was an enemy. But I said, he believed God saved him. Moving forward, when Lon Nol led a coup and took over in Cambodia in 1970, Cook and several other Montagnards were given commissions in the Cambodian military. And Cook moved his family to Phnom Penh, where they lived. His family, his wife and 3 sons by this point, moved them to a military base across the street from a military base. And then he departed for combat operations. He told Haile that he would return for the family when he could. In the next years, Cook was in and out of Cambodia and Vietnam in various forms of operations. Lon Nol sent him abroad for training 3 times with the Americans. He was in 1971 and 75. His training included he was sent to the U.S. Intelligence Officers School in Okinawa, Japan, where he was trained as an intelligence officer. He made 2 trips to Fort Eustis, Virginia. He trained as a transportation officer. And in 74, the head of Full Row, and I'm trying to save you names as much as possible and save myself embarrassment by trying to pronounce them, he was named the Chief of Staff of Full Row, the Montagnard military operation. Cook was actually in the United States. He and another Montagnard officer, when in April of 75, Phnom Penh fell to the Khmer Rouge. Some of the Montagnards who were in the officers who were in Phnom Penh sought refuge in the French embassy, and the French gave them up and were never heard from again, assumed to be dead. Now, Cook was very interested in getting his family out of Phnom Penh, and through the services of an evangelical Christian humanitarian group called World Vision, Cook's family was extricated from Phnom Penh. The story is quite dramatic. It's very dramatic. And it's once again this Cook believed that God was watching over and protecting him for a mission. The family was extricated on a plane that World Vision was paying for. And literally the last flight out of Phnom Penh, the last people could get out of Phnom Penh. But the plane had mechanical difficulties. Well, I should first say, the documents to go to Thailand, where they were going, passports, I'm sure faked, other documentation, visas, had not arrived, and the plane had to take off. So they took off for Thailand without the documentation for the family, but they had mechanical difficulty, and they had to circle back to fix the plane. I don't know what's up here. You can flip through it. You can just keep flipping through. My wife will yell at me one way or the other. Just keep flipping through it. Here are CIG Montagnard fighters that fought with the Americans. Flip through. Here are training of the Montagnards by the Green Berets. And you come. Here was what I wanted before. This is where Cook is from, his home birthplace. Anyway, the plane. They returned to fix the plane. At that point, the documentation arrived, and so they were able to get the documentation for the family and flew to Thailand. Later, the family was extricated, once again through the help of the Christian organizations, was brought to the United States. By this point, Cook had been in the United States for quite some time. He was an American citizen. So bringing his family in was a bit easier. These were different days than now. Talk about refugees. These were different days then. The family lived in several places, including Charleston, South Carolina, Abilene, Kansas, Newport News, Virginia. Returning to Charleston. In Charleston, Cook received a GED, high school diploma. After all, he left school when he was 14. And an associate's degree in electrical engineering technology from Trident Technical College in Charleston. In 1988, the daughter of Cook's original sponsors, her husband was a doctor. They moved to Spartanburg, and they brought the family to Spartanburg. And that's how they got to Spartanburg. The family settled permanently there. The family joined the local Christian Missionary Alliance Church, which was the Protestant church that did a great deal of the proselytizing with the Montagnards and was very active in that church. The church ultimately died for lack of people, and the family moved from that church to a local Southern Baptist church. Cook himself continued to commute to Greensboro, North Carolina, where he served as a pastor of a Montagnard church in Greensboro. Every other week he commuted. His day job, he worked for the textile giant Milliken in their engineering company, and he worked with them until 1998 when he retired. As I said, when the first Montagnards arrived in the United States, and you can flip through and see if there's anything else. Well, yeah, that's my final. We'll talk about it. There is Cook as a United States, in a United States military uniform, and here are some other things I'll be talking about later. And when the first Montagnard refugees arrived in the United States in 1986, as I said, Cook had been here for over a decade. He was an American citizen, and he was involved with all these new refugee organizations. Mostly the settlements were in North Carolina. He was involved with all of them, but his priorities were quite different. Most of the Montagnard organizations, and they largely came as churches. With their minister, churches came and settled. And their primary goal was maintaining Dakar identity and culture, at the same time as assimilating into American culture, trying to maintain their culture. Cook's goals, priorities were different. He was not so much focused on the United States as he was focused on Indochina, of supporting the Montagnards in Indochina. He founded the Dakar Foundation, best known as the Montagnard Foundation, in 1990, which had gained status, a U.S. tax-exempt status. He was like all the others. He was very interested in maintaining Montagnard identity, but it was primarily the persecution of the Dakar people in the Central Highlands that was his primary concern. Now, with all these Montagnard groups, there were clashes, strong personalities, church politics. Now, they all pretty much had this, they all had the same theology, but the politics of leaders put them into conflict. And Cook was not in the mainstream with most of the other groups. In fact, there were frictions, there were factions, and the Montagnards believed, I don't know the truth, that the Vietnamese had agents in the United States trying to stir up problems among the Montagnards. But in any case, Cook was primarily concerned in what was happening to the Montagnards in Cambodia and Vietnam. He was very active in raising money from the community to found churches. He founded 18, raised money, he founded 18 house churches in primarily Cambodia, some in Vietnam, and sending money to support and raising attention to the plight of the Montagnards. I'll talk just a little bit about this before the SRV, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, the North Vietnamese takeover. On one hand, talked in terms of maintaining Vietnamese culture, etc. But that meant kin culture. It did not mean Vietnamese. The Vietnamese, it did not mean the Montagnards. The Montagnards to the South Vietnamese were backward. They were not part of Vietnamese culture. They needed to be transformed. And part of the problem was their identity with Christianity. Among the things that needed to be changed was to eradicate Christianity, particularly its fundamentalist forms of Christianity. It's very interesting. I was reading yesterday in the paper. Today, Christianity is exploding in Vietnam. It's exploding as young Vietnamese are turning to Christianity, both Protestant and Catholic, and also to Buddhism and other forms traditionally. But we were going through a period here that Christianity is a major, major problem. The Montagnards were persecuted. Hundreds fled out of Vietnam to Cambodia. Cambodia did not want the refugee problem, and so Cambodia was repressing the Montagnards. Much of my research comes from Human Watch research, the Human Watch, following persecution of Montagnards, following persecution of Christians. But for 2 decades, Montagnards, and particularly Christians, were targeted. Meanwhile, their land was being taken from them and turned over to Ken Vietnamese for development, turning traditional Montagnard lands into coffee plantations run by the Ken, turning into lumber, and then to upgrade and modernize Vietnam. Vietnamese cloaked their actions in terms of development of Vietnam and also of anti-terrorism, of the national security threat, of the terrorism of Montagnard people. Vietnam was a signatory to the United Nations and other international agreements on the protection of religious liberty. The Vietnamese Constitution declares full religious liberty or freedom from religious persecution. Article 70, however, also reminds you of the old Soviet constitutions, has this limitation. No one can violate the freedom of belief and of religion, nor can anyone misuse beliefs and religions to contravene the law and the security of the state. To the definition of the Vietnamese government, these religious groups were attempting to undermine Vietnam, and particularly people like Cook Sor, and he was Cook Sor. I used to call him Cook Sor. I was told it's Cook Sor. He is a leading terrorist against the Vietnamese nation. Religion tended to be approved, to be practiced, but they were approving and basically became agents of the state. It wasn't just Christians that were unapproved. Cao Dai, Wawa Buddhists, Khmer Buddhists, the United Buddhists of Vietnam, all of these were unapproved religions. The Catholic sect, Hamon, founded in Kon Tum in 1999, was targeted as a... the government was rather heavy-handed against these false religions. But the main culprit was what they called Degas Protestantism, these Montagnard Protestant beliefs, this evangelical Christianity, deeply established in the Highlands, going all the way back to the 50s. It was considered by the Vietnamese a false religion, a guise for political agenda, and an independence movement against public order. National security demanded that it be crushed. When the Degas Protestants refused to join the sham tool of an authorized religion, the Vietnamese police and military units were sent into the Central Highlands to break up these churches. They were house churches, break up these house churches, and to drive out the Vietnamese. The Cambodians didn't want them, so they were caught between. Forced confessions, public constructive criticism, and re-education followed. The clear message was Degas Protestantism must end. In the United States, Cook was active, bringing this attention to the world. He spoke to the American State Department, to the UN, the European Union, all various entities, trying to call attention to what was happening to the Montagnard people, and the world, more or less, ignored it. He became involved with a political party, the Transnational Radical Party, dedicated to human rights in Indochina, became an active spokesman. He began a long friendship with this man, Sam Rainsy, up here, who was a Cambodian human rights activist. His father had been in the Cambodian government. Rainsy had been in the himself had been in the government, and he was thrown out for his constant raising issues of human rights violations in Cambodia and prosecuted. Well, yeah, I don't know. Probably need that water my wife went and got. She didn't save any for me, I imagine. Oh, poor thing, me. Anyway, he was thrown out, but there's water. Wonderful. That he and Rainsy formed an alliance, an agreement that when Rainsy came to power in Cambodia, which he believed he would, that they would form an alliance to support the Montagnards in Cambodia. But that never came about. In his latter years, as he continued to work, his latter years dying of cancer, Koch continued to work to foster human rights, to call attention. He postponed treatments, cancer treatments in Charlotte, to participate in a Cambodian Montagnard rally. In the last weeks of his life, he brought a woman, a human rights activist, to Spartanburg to call attention to that. Literally, in his last days, dying of cancer, he put aside these things to do what his life was all about. In Vietnam, his mother was beaten. She was arrested at a prayer vigil, shocked by an electric stun gun, kicked repeatedly. She suffered medical problems. She was arrested several times. She was forced to read a statement on television, told to respond that to reject her son and tell people not to follow Kok Kasor. Rather than do what she was told, she said on television, "I am an old woman. I do not know what my son has done. I have not seen him for decades. You know what he's doing. You give the message. I am an old woman." No one would listen to me anyway. When she died at age 80 in 2011, on the day of her death, 16,000 Dagar Christians came to the village to remember her. The Vietnamese tried to set up roadblocks. They organized 2,500 soldiers and security police to keep people from coming. They could not stop it. Koch was a terrorist. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. Koch readily admitted his contacts in Indochina. He readily admitted organizing prayer vigils, but he expressed constantly his understanding that Christianity demanded nonviolence. He spoke at a rally in 2020 in Washington, D.C. on Vietnam Human Rights Day, in which he emphasized the Dagar, the Montagnards, do not hate the Vietnamese. We simply want human rights in our ancestral lands. We simply want our churches to have freedom of religion. The North Vietnamese, he was trying to overthrow the government. He said, less than 1 million people cannot overthrow a country of 800 million people that is fully armed with soldiers and police. Koch simply echoed the message. God created all human beings, and God loves us, and God loves all humanity and wishes us to all live in peace. His constant message. The Montagnards do not want a separate country. We simply want to live by our our languages, our culture, our religion. We build our churches not to work against the government, but to learn how we can transform ourselves to be better human beings according to the teaching of the Bible, and to keep the mother tongue alive, and most of all, to have hope for future lives. I'm going to bring this to an end. One of the things that was very prominent, the Vietnamese supposedly honoring Montagnard culture had displays, museums, appealing to the tourist industry. Now, the people who made all the tokens and various things which were sold to tourists were done by Ken Vietnamese. There were no Montagnards involved. There were performances, singers, dancing and singing. Montagnard dances, all done by Ken Vietnamese, not by Montagnard. Vernacular languages were subordinated to Vietnamese. Only if you had 500,000 people could a vernacular language be an official language. And the Montagnards collectively had less than 1 million people. In conclusion, until his death, the quiet-spoken Cook continued to reach out to political figures, the U.S. State Department, the world community with his message. He often asked the rhetorical question, why the United States ignored the treatment of the Montagnards, the people who had been your first ally and to the end your allies, who had fought and died with the United States. How could the United States overlook that the toxic herbicide Agent Orange had been used primarily in the highlands and damaged Montagnards? How could the United States scramble to engage in economic, business, social, cultural, and military agreements with the Vietnamese and totally disregard other human rights? He pointed out that the Montagnards had become simply collateral damage. But Cook was not bitter. His focus was always on his faith. In his pastoral role, he traveled constantly within the Montagnard community to preach love, to preach unity. As I said, he would continue to found, I said 18, it was 13 churches in Cambodia. As he said, hate is not of God, and violence could never be the answer. Now, this is a brave warrior. He asked for people to pray that God would change the hearts of the oppressors and open the minds and hearts of people around the globe to the plight of indigenous people. But he also said ultimate freedom was assured in God's heavenly kingdom. In his private life, Cook was a devout family man who loved his children and his grandchildren. When his website still exists, it displayed groups of his children, his grandchildren, and they are an amazing group. Of his 3 sons, 2 of them are physicians and have a joint, I'm trying to wear deal with foot, podiatry, have a joint practice in Camden. One is an ITT specialist. His daughter-in-law has a PhD, serves as a school counselor. That's my phone. It's not supposed to be doing that. Go away, phone. All right, let me go away here, and I will finish. Go away. I should have shut it off. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away, Jennifer. All right.
If you could leave a few minutes for
Yeah, I'm bringing it down. His grandchildren follow in the same vein. Although the family remains active in the Dagar community, Cook's leadership cannot be reprised. The Montagnard Foundation is dead. But I'm happy to know, having met the young man, not so young, he had a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old kid, so he's not so young, that he is keeping alive that tradition. He knew Cook. He's keeping it alive. The Montagnard channel on YouTube, he does this. As I said, I've seen the the Montagnard thing was uploaded, and I have seen it. So now I've become a voice. I'll simply end by saying, little is known of Kokosor, his life and his mission, but they remain significant in the story, the quest for human rights of a largely oppressed people. Okay, that's a part of what I presented. You might just flip through again. Let's see if there's anything we missed. Just flip through them. Okay, here's Homeland. This is sort of a timeline of things. Training by the Green Berets. And there's one I'm trying to find. Again, Montagnards. Keep on. There's two messages. I don't seem to can't find them. I don't know where they are. There are two in there I wanted to see. One is I don't know where it went. It's a picture of Montagnard houses, the long houses, which you can go to in various places in North Carolina and see them, because Montagnards still live in those long houses. And the other one is when the last of the full row were found in the 1990s, still fighting in the back of the jungle, and were brought to the United States in 1992. They literally had been fighting since the end of the war, or had been a group of malnutrition people with old World War II weapons, and basically starving, were found and were airlifted out and came to the United States. Well, I have many functions here. Okay, all right, that's it. I got a few minutes, not many. I didn't leave very many. If anybody has questions about this, the end of the war, whatever, I will be glad to entertain them.
The man that was sitting in the previous slide, the man sitting next to him,
Sam Rainsy.
Yeah, while you were talking, I found an article where the Cambodian government sentenced him to life imprisonment in exile.
That's right. That's right. He's because of his activities and against the Khmer Rouge. Yes, he has been at life imprisonment in exile.
It was based on some video that involved Mr.
Yeah, which that.
Back in 2019.
Yeah, yep. That is very correct. That is very correct. Yes, yes.
Where can we read more about this?
About this whole thing.
Yeah, whatever. Yes.
Well, my full article, I can, if somebody will give me I have a copy of it here, and I have the full article, and it has a website that you can punch on.
We have that in electronic form, right?
Yes, yeah, it's in electronic form.
I could post it on our website. And,
now, the one thing I will say is, and I'm at fault, the journal that published this spelled Koch's name Kosor, and I missed it. I literally missed it when I was approving the final proofs. I missed it. So I'm kind of embarrassed it has his name spelled. But yes, there is a long article on this, which I have done.
Question.
Yes.
Do the Montagnards celebrate the same New Year as the Hmong people?
I tell you, I cannot answer that question because they don't all the Montagnards don't celebrate all the same holidays.
Okay.
There are 32 different people, and the Jirai or the major group, but no, they have different traditions, different things, and so whether the Hmong or not, the Hmong is just another group or another of this plethora of groups in Indochina. So can't really answer that question.
Well, I know up in Greenville and Spartanburg we have the Hmong New Year celebration every year.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if they participate in that.
Well, I know they have their own celebrations. I've been invited. I've never quite made it there. They have, and which a lot of the North Carolina have them in North Carolina, and then sometimes the North Carolina family comes to Spartanburg, and that's been one of my failings.
Joe, I wanted to let you know something. That we have somebody who brought an artifact he wanted to show.
Yes,
And before everybody breaks up,
I recognize that.
Yeah, I was in Pleku in 1970. One of my sergeants found a village and brought in some items. This is a mountain yard. I call it a banana knife. Got that hook on the end so you can see it now. Okay. The museum, they have a statue over at the State Museum, the State Military Museum of the Mountain Yard. Culture was probably pre-Christian. because it's, you see the statue, you'll understand it's some sort of feminine goddess. But, yeah, I would recommend going over to the State Museum after this. And see
Well,
what
I will
it's like.
say this. One wishes that when you were young, I tell you, I preach this to my students all the time, to be aware of the things that are going around you that you may seem mundane, but later in your life will be very important. When I was in Vietnam, I did not know anything about the Montagnards. Although one of my monitoring sites was in a Montagnard village at Dinh Quang. Now, when I went up there, I knew these people were different than the Vietnamese. I knew they were different. I didn't know the difference. And I was just trying to stay alive and come back. I wish I'd known more about that. I had one direct experience with a Montagnard. I was in one of our distant sites. I ran electronic intelligence. That was one of our distant sites. We were there, and I was supposed to go on R&R the next day. So I was just trying to get back to Swan Lake to on R&R. But as we're getting ready to leave in our helicopter, this man came walking out of the mountains. And he was Stone Age. He had a knife, something like that. Dressed in a loincloth. And he was, we brought in an interrogator who could speak his language. And the story was, he was a porter, a slave. He'd been kept by the North Vietnamese and had held him for like 8 years as a slave, a porter. And that's what they used all the time. They looked down the Montagnards as savages. He was a porter, carried things for them. He finally escaped and came down out of the mountains. And the major I was with, remember, I'm trying to get back to Spartanburg, so I'm going on an X-ray. He wants to go see where the Montagnard he came from. So we take off up into the mountains to see these plots in the mountains where the North Vietnamese were raising food. And we flew over him, took pictures and all of that, and collected all the information from him. That was my one experience with the Montagnard. And again, once again, my provincial perspective was, I just want to get out of here, get back to Spartanburg, because I have a flight tomorrow to Hong Kong. Well, we did get back. I made my flight to Hong Kong. But those were my two experiences. Like everything, I wish when I was there, and I was not a total naive. I mean, when I was drafted out of a PhD program, I wasn't an 18-year-old. I should have known better. I should have. And it's one of the things, as an elderly, aging person, I'm trying to teach my students. Understand the life that's going on around you. Someday, people will ask about it. Someday, and I can make some political statements, but I won't here. But understand life going on. And I wish I had known more. Now, I wrote a memoir of my experience in Vietnam. So anything else before they free you?
Fritz in the back.
How many, are there many Montagnards left in their traditional areas, or are they all left?
There are some left. They are relatively few. They still continue to suffer persecution to this day, so I'm sure there are fewer and fewer and fewer of them. And the number in the United States is in the few thousands. It's very small here. I can't really speak to how many are left there, but when you have a political regime dedicated to your extermination, you're probably not going to be thriving.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Once again, we have tickets here for a free tour starting about 1:30, about that time, over at the Relic Room at the museum. And I've got about 14 of them. Ben's got a bunch more than I do. So, and you can use these just as a free pass another day. But it's going to be that much more valuable if you can make the tour today.
And it's a wonderful museum.